into my collar. But the sound is on now? Okay, good. All right. Okay. So, and then a little quarrel I had with LA Times. Some of the reporting is much better in the Times, actually, I will say. Even New York Times, I think, is doing much better in its reporting. Although we do ask the question, how did these major media outlets get the first images of the attack on the kibbutzim on the border from their stringers who knew where to go mysteriously, right? There's problems with the press on this. So anyway, so now what I call the unkindest cut of all on Jewish Quislings, and I'll get to that. So yesterday, Thursday evening, and then yesterday, Friday, what's the 8th and the 9th, so it'll be Thursday, Friday, marked 85 years since the dreaded Kristallnacht, or it's often translated into English, the night of broken glass. The Germans use the term Reichspogrom, which is maybe the more correct one, which is the pogrom instituted by the German Reich. I don't need to belabor details as to what it signified, but I do have in my family records a note that my grandmother in Vienna was among those who were attacked at that time. And shortly afterwards, my grandparents were able to escape to Switzerland. My father and uncle headed off to Czechoslovakia. It's been 85 years since, and I know that we Jews around the world have felt much more safe and secure since the rise of the State of Israel. We've been accustomed to saving Jews in the middle of a hijacking to Entebbe, or the airlifting of Jews to safety throughout the Middle East and Africa in the intervening years. And after the Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War, and more recently, Abraham Accords and potential alliances with various Arab countries, we could allow ourselves into a dream of security. None of us could have imagined the horror of something worse than a Kristallnacht or something worse than the worst pogroms of the past, but it did happen on October 7th. I don't know if in the Crusades, when they attacked Jewish communities, they did as badly as these people did. They're so evil. We now, just last week, marked the 30 days of the mourning for those who are dead. But we know that our mourning, both in Israel and out of Israel, is not ended, and the struggle now seems never ending. Our grandson's in Israel. He's volunteering around. Sent us this camera footage. Let's see if I can get it on. Here, right next to where he is, a little yeshiva of American students studying in Israel. There's a terrorist who was just apprehended. He's right next door, right? That's the never-ending story going on in that end. And then just here, as I mentioned earlier in Westlake Village, this pro-Israeli Paul Kessler knocked down by a pro-Palestinian, a professor of computer sciences at a college of all people. No, was it intentional or not? No, but we know that these protests are getting much more violent. This Paul Kessler, blessed memory, much more violent, much more dangerous. And just Wednesday, there was a screening of the video of the Hamas atrocities to journalists and people in the film industry at the Museum of the Holocaust. And pro-Palestinian protesters tried to interrupt it because they said, if you see this, you're distracting from the real cause, which is the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. You can't show it. And became very violent. Very, very common. Very violent, very common behavior from them. At the museum, it's not museum, it's the Wiesenthal, Museum of Tolerance, of all things, the name Museum of Tolerance. Here's the fighting. Museum of Tolerance. Fighting, trying to interrupt this because they didn't want us to tell our case.
Contains extremely graphic and violent footage of the October 7th Hamas attack.
There we go. Okay. I'm not going to belabor too much. You get my point. So last week, as I said, I let myself vent on those who wanted to pin the blame on Israel. And I come to my central gripe, which is history repeating itself, or they say deja vu all over again. I come to this subject because I was in the midst of looking for material from my father's documents, because there'll be a special exhibit in December in Frankfurt, Germany, on the 75th anniversary of the reestablishing of the Jewish community after the Holocaust. And you may have known my father, Rabbi William Weinberg, served as the first state rabbi of Hesse. That's the area around Frankfurt. But before that, he worked with the DP camps, the displaced persons camps in Austria, the survivors. And I had published a book about his years through Soviet exile, and one day to follow up with an account of the years helping survivors rebuild their lives. So in the process, I found 3 articles of his dating from the very first years after the Holocaust, to be eerily relevant to what we are seeing today. And by the way, in his years in Germany, he was still fighting the Nazis because although the American and the British and so on were sitting on top of Germany, there was still the Nazi underground. And they were still working to try to get at Jews. Right? Eventually they were put down, but they were still active in those years. So you can hear very loudly the justification that the Palestinians, after all, are suffering at the hands of Jews, quasi-Zionists, 56 and 75 years, 100 years. I mentioned that last week. And so we should not be surprised if they are raped and beheaded and tortured and kidnapped. This was called distributive justice. It is, in the words of the great theoretician of colonial resistance, Frantz Fanon, is violence is a necessary act of the oppressed. Necessary. Violence against everyone is necessary, right? And it's taught in all the universities, essential for decolonialization. So if our people are raped, that's okay. That's distributive justice. So you have this, you saw the students at Harvard decried Israel as entirely responsible for Hamas attack. Groups at the University of Virginia were saying colonized people can resist occupation of lands by whatever means necessary. It's straight from the textbooks, Frantz Fanon and the people of his like. The great spokesmen for the colonial uprisings, like in Algeria, where millions died afterwards as a result. They can do whatever they want. And then there was a group of toughs that took the cake by praising Hamas' ingenious creativity. All right, so now Jewish students are being physically attacked on campuses at Tulane and elsewhere. And there was a hearing this week at the congressional hearings on the threats Jewish students face. And in the middle of the hearing, pro-Palestinian demonstrators came in to shout them down. You may not say. You Jews have no rights to talk. That's what they mean. They would not let our voices be heard. So sadly for us, the protest by the pro-Palestinian camp, very rough and aggressive. We mentioned this dear Paul Kessler. And violence by the pro-Palestinian side is not new. We saw similar attacks on Jews just here in Beverly Hills 2 years ago by Palestinian, the Hamas fellow travelers, or the useful idiots of Hamas, if you remember that, at one of the restaurants. They came in, they said, who's a Jew, and tried to beat them up. So all of this anger against Israel, and by extension against Jews, been, we say, justified by apologists for murder. And I say deja vu, blame the victim, blame the victim. This was used against Jews even while we were mourning our dead and licking our wounds after the Holocaust, of the greatest, almost complete, successful attempt at erasing us physically from this planet. So here is how the same apologists for murder blamed us after the Holocaust, same tones. This is an essay my father wrote in the German journal, German language journal, the Neue Weg, 1946. So it's a little bit more than a year after the end of the fighting. Non mea sed tua culpa. Not me, but you are at fault. It's a rephrasing of a Latin term where one makes confession, mea culpa. Now they're saying, no, we're not guilty. So, nun ist das Schweigen gebrochen und man spricht in letzter Zeit. No, I'm not going to read the German more. You get the point. Here's translation. Now the silence is broken and people are speaking lately also to non-Jews about what has happened to us in the Hitler era. It is therefore not without interest to note what Austrian accomplices have to say about the causes, Austrian accomplices. Now, the Austrians try to say, well, it's not our fault, we're not Germans. But of course, they're the first, right, in that period. None other than Adolf Hitler, best Austrian known in history. Final sentence of this article by D. Hornbostel. Anti-Semitism and Jewish problem are significant for us, he wrote. And so we quote the same verbatim. This is the other fellow's quote. Another prerequisite for a peaceful and prosperous coexistence with the Jewish elements in Europe is, of course, the determination of the Jews themselves to get rid of all the fatal mistakes and weaknesses that anti-Semitism wants to attack and inciting to such brutal activity as we have unfortunately had to witness in the recent past. Abbas, what did he say? Well, Hitler was justified not against Jews, right? But if Jews did this, Jews did that, Jews did this, Jews did that, you understand they had a reason to kill Jews. Same words, same words. That's it, and he's supposed to be our partner. He's supposed to be the moderate one. So in other words, you Jews deserved it. You got what you paid for. So that's my father summed up the implication. The murder of 6 million Jews in Europe and their plundering were ultimately expression of the righteous people's anger. At least that's what it must sound like to the ears of the average anti-Semitic reader. See? Same thing is being said today. If we're talking about mistakes, why not talk about your own mistakes at the same time? Is this the Austrian way of looking for the splinter in a neighbor's eye and overlooking the beam in your own? Where Hitler, says Inquart, Kaltenbrunner, and countless of their accomplices not Austrian? Okay, so this is the opposite of the Catholic confession, where he says, I have not sinned, but you have sinned. Just the opposite. So this is after the Holocaust. Same tone, sounded by political and academic figures here after murder, rape, and tortures and kidnapping of 2023, right? So Representative Rashida Tlaib, after a full day of silence, took her whole day to say something. I grieve the Palestinian and Israeli lives lost yesterday. Very nice. As long, yesterday there were no Palestinians, right? That day of the October 7th, there were no Palestinians attacked. She grieves Palestinian lives yesterday as well as today, right? Oh, no Palestinian was killed, but she grieves it. Okay. As long as our country provides billions in the unconditional funding to support the apartheid government, this heartbreaking cycle of violence will continue. Blame the United States and blame Israel. Yes, it's all Israel's fault. Same thing that the Austrians said there. She also had her original interpretation, said from river to the sea, and that's merely aspirational. Aspirational. It was invented by, it's an outcome of a slogan used in Arab circles to get rid of Israel, period. So was the word, as the Germans phrased it, Lösung der Judenfrage, the final solution of the Jewish question. We're not killing Jews. We're just solving the problem of the Jews. Just aspirational. Just aspiration. So now we have, as I said, physical attacks on students, on Jewish students at campus. Here in UC Davis, not so far away, professor tweeting a call to violence. Even put her picture up. One group of people we have easy access to in the US, all these Zionist journalists who spread propaganda, misinformation, they have houses with addresses, kids in school. They can fear their bosses, but they should fear us more. Knife, axe, blood drops. Right, a professor. Okay, I think she got sacked, but she tried to take it down afterwards, right? Fine, incitement to violence. That's good. We can name names. We're allowed to do it. Oh, but if we do it to them, oh, how dare you do it? So, again, the same thing. It's not my fault, it's your fault. Deja vu all over again. Then we have those among our Jews who are very complacent, living lives of comparative luxury and privilege, who would disconnect from the entire Jewish affair after World War II. So, December of 1945, it's only a few months after the rubble of all the buildings settles down, all the shooting and shelling, they settled in Vienna. Then in this magazine, again, Der Neue Weg, somebody written, Wir sind quitt. Well, we are even Steven. So my father answered, Sind wir wirklich quitt? Are we really even Steven? All right, and I see that this article actually made its way into an academic journal in Germany, about zwei jüdische Schriftsteller, two Jewish authors in the post-war Austria, and it's talking about one of the two in this article, Hans Weigel, noted Austrian Jewish playwright and theater critic who survived the Holocaust in relative comfort in Switzerland. So this is the summary from that article, and they mentioned his original in American published Wien Courier in October. We have nothing to blame each other. No one can bring his dead back alive. With your many dead, with us too, we're even. We don't think too much about yesterday. So my father then lambasted him in this essay. He says, perhaps Mr. Weigel is even. We, the majority of Jews around the world and here, are not. And Weinberg's discussed this summary in this academic article, joined by a second one. Imagine the indignation of Weigel in the exuberance of the joy of reunion, was not content with the receipts of over 6.5 million dead, but also to differentiate those Jews who do not want to return home with the equally problematic sentence, because no one is ever forced to return home. Only those who come back here to Austria who are Austrian elements. In other words, if you are satisfied with being Austrian, what do you have with the Austrians? End of the story. So he went on to contrast this Jewish writer who was so happy with being Austrian with the great German writer Thomas Mann, who refused to return to Germany, settle in the United States out of disgust with his home country. So of the same ilk, same type, you might recall, some of the memory back enough, there was a Jewish chancellor of Austria, Bruno Kreisky, in the 1970s, same type like this author. He was the man who single-handedly turned the international socialist movements against Israel, more than anyone else. That was his job. So somebody asked him about the Jewish people, and he denied there's such a thing as Jewish people. But then he says, "Wenn die Juden ein Volk sind, so ist es ein mieses Volk." Mieskeit. You know the word mieskeit? Ugly, disgusting. If Jews are indeed a people, then they are an ugly people. Mises Volk, ugly people. This is by the Chancellor of Germany, of Austria at that time, right? Oh, I can sit aside. I have nothing to do. So we can go about, most painful when we see among the rush to blame some of our very own heirs of Bruno Kreisky or Hans Weigel or the great anti-Semite, father of all anti-Semites, Karl Marx, right? Supposedly one of our own, who abandoned us completely, betrayed us completely, built his communism on a betrayal of Jews. You can read his original text before he wrote the Communist Manifesto and Capital. And so now we have also those who in the Talmudic statement act like Zimri, who want to betray Israel in the Sinai, but demand the rewards, act like Zimri, but demand the words of Pinchas. I have to fix that. Save the Israelites from Zimri's sin. So I'll use another metaphor. We're taking it from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar about Brutus, his closest friend, who stabbed Caesar. For Brutus, as you know, was Caesar's angel. Judge, O you gods, how dearly Caesar loved him. This was the most unkindest cut of all. So I found an essay. Again, all of these things repeat. Regarding the problem of Jewish Quislings, in a journal, Most in Opinion, about 2 years after the Holocaust, Jewish communities in Austria and Germany trying to get organized. They're still in pain from the wounds of Nazi Germany. So this was his typewritten manuscript before it was submitted. I found that. And it is zum Problem jüdischer Quislings, the problem of Jewish Quislings. And he goes on into it. In all the European states that had the misfortune to experience the bloody rule of the Germans, the concept of Quislings is known. Those people criminally inclined by fear or opportunism or political immaturity or for money without dignity for the sake of supposed national interests, in the moral sense and the factual sense, to have made themselves accomplices of the Nazi tyrants. So Quislings in general. So in antiquity, we Jews had our Josephus Flavius, who abandoned his comrades in arms. And while the comrades were being dragged in the triumphant chariots, he was writing poems to the conqueror. And Tiberius Alexander, nephew of the great first Jewish philosopher, Philo, governor in Judea and later governor in Egypt, let his blood-hungry, rapacious soldiers loose on the quarters of the Jews in Alexandria and then took part under Titus in the destruction of Jerusalem. He was the actual head of the forces. Hitler repeats itself, he said. During Hitler's time, many Jews helped in the enslavement and deportation of Jews to the labor, concentration, extermination camps. Many have committed guilt in their capacity as Judenrat, Jewish council members, by compiling and signing lists of those destined for destruction, by assisting in confiscation of Jewish assets for the benefit of the Germans. Many committed guilt in their capacity as Yupos, Jewish police, enlisting Jews for destruction or deportation. Some took part directly in the atrocities of the devilries of the Germans as kapos. So he notes that while most Jews returned home wandering, lost, groping, grieving, disappointed, uprooted, desperate, and tired of life, our Quislings looked in a good mood, were impeccably dressed, and stood out from all the others because of their well-fed nature. Such people have forfeited, according to all written and unwritten laws in all liberated countries, the right to play any leading role in social life. They're coming to the Jewish community saying, we have experience. We worked under the Nazis. We have organizational experience. You need us. And they were saying no. Where they still try to push themselves into the foreground, is the inevitable duty of every Jew to push them into the background. So now, after the knowledge of the horrid pillage, rape, torture, murder, infanticide, and kidnapping, I reserve my greatest revulsion after the officers and soldiers of Hamas who carried out next unto those of our own. Say that I'm not fair or I'm over the top, but it's our own who thought it was cool or hip or progressive to take over the Capitol Rotunda. It was 2 weeks ago in the name of Jewish Voices for Peace, and if not now, threatening to shut down the emblem of American democracy, do their own January 6th thing, all the while draped in talit and kippah. They repeated grandstanding a week later in Grand Central Station. So here's a group of younger Jews use this as a flag of distinction, something possible only for children of privileged Jewish elites. So here's the shameless proclamation. We converged in historic numbers in DC with unprecedented heart power, and for us to say ceasefire now, not in our names, not with our money, The largest Jewish protest in solidarity with Palestinians ever. The blood is on the ground, and they're saying in protest for the Palestinians. A staggering 5,000 people from around the country descended on the National Mall in a Jews Against Genocide rally. Only a couple days' notice, in the middle of a Wednesday workday, proud to be joined by Representative Tlaib and Cory Bush, as well as activist Naomi Klein and the actor Mo Amer, as well as our friends at If Now, would led us an impressive shutdown of all 13 entrances to the White House on Monday. And then 24 rabbis led almost 500 Jews in the sit-in in the rotunda of a key building. That's not a January 7th uprising from our own? Not equivalent? As rabbis blew shofars and shared testimonies from Palestinians in Gaza, the thousands outside chanted, "Ceasefire now and let Gaza live." We shut down the streets outside the office of members of Congress for 3 hours. Elected officials and staffers watching from their windows as Capitol Police arrested the hundreds inside the building. The Jews say, "Ceasefire now." This happened as the organization accepted, like all other progressive groups, the Hamas ministry lie of the hospital bombing. Right? The blood of the massacre of October 7th was still wet on the ground, and these Quislings mourned the murderers. The most unkindest cut of all, as it's so convenient for enemies of the Jews to trot out their token Jew and use it against us. Jewish students have been harassed and physically attacked on campus, in part in this country and around the world, because of such protestations. So I'm going to apply my father's recommendations about Jewish Quislings and suggest the Jewish community close out jobs for those fellow travelers. I know people have been doing this now, where they found students posting, taking down posters and so on, saying, "You go and try to come to me for a job. I'll see you at the unemployment office." So I know I'm being ungenerous, but when the Middle East has been taken over by the dogs of Khomeini, the Hezbollahs, the Hamas, the Houthis, there's no room for generosity of spirit. These are fellow travelers of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I know people try to say, well, Hamas is not exactly Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and so on, not Al-Qaeda. Yeah, they're at each other's throats. But so were the communists at each other's throats, between the Stalinists and the Trotskyites, the Maoists and the Viet Congists at each other's throats. Yes, deadly enemies, but they were united in the same goal of ideological domination. The goal was the same. The end goal was the same. This is a question of strategy, right? Stalin was communism in one nation first. Trotsky was worldwide. That's the difference. So think carefully when posing for the downtrodden. I'm going to give you a forewarning. There was one Jew rose to the highest pinnacle of success in the fight for revolutionary justice. The genius of the revolution, the founder of the Red Army, the proponent of perpetual revolution, Leon Trotsky, but the son of privilege, a very well-to-do family, assimilated into the old Russian society. Right? Very characteristic of this. And this is what he received from his colleague and comrade in arms when he was getting his haircut in Mexico City. The haircut went a little too deep with the axe in his head. Right? Trotsky. Right? So one last thought of warning. The Jew was the canary in the coal mine in World War II. Hitler started with the Jews, and soon all of Europe was in flames. Asia was in flames. The Jew, as the Israeli Zionist, is still the canary in the coal mine. It's not my words. It is a phrase that the Arabs themselves have said. It says first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. Right? You read their declarations, read the proclamations, read the materials being posted by Islamists. And you don't just have to go to the extremists. You go to Al-Azhar University, the great central institution of Islam. You read what's going on, and you realize that this is part of what they see as a world war, not just on a little tiny Israel, but part of a world war where the Palestinians are but pawns in their game. So, I wish I had happier words for us, hoping and praying that we shall see speedy resolution.
What kind of resolution?
Redeemed and brought back safe and sound, and that Hamas and similar organizations be uprooted. When the kingdom of iniquity would be destroyed from the earth. We say Shabbat Shalom. Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Okay. Announce that. Yes, we wish to everybody Shabbat Shalom. We're going to go to Kiddush and turn on. Go ahead. Yeah, this a Captagon. There was medicine, a pill called Captagon. The Germans used it in their armies. They used something similar, so the soldiers would fight till they dropped dead without thinking. It's a very similar strategy. Again, revolutionaries, forces justify everything for their goal. And we should not be surprised. Okay, so Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom. Oh, what are you talking about? You're talking about the Shaw Foundation at USC? Wait. Oh, you mean, no, in Israel you have Yad Vashem. So maybe it's the Shaw Foundation from USC. That's what you're talking about. Maybe. Yeah.